started working full-time doing comic books when I was 20. So then at 23 I moved to New York, worked for Marvel, doing Spider-Man, the Hulk, the X-Men, all the characters that they have that you can think of. Then I started working for Warner Brothers doing storyboards. So I did storyboards for Disney and Warner Brothers on a lot of their television stuff. A storyboard has camera moves, the pans, the trucks, all the acting, all the cues to the dialogue. Everything that you're going to see on the screen has to be mapped out for the animators to follow. The strength of a lot of commercial work that's orchestrated by corporations is the fact that they're shooting for the widest possible response. So in the worst case, you get the lowest common denominator. But in the best case, you get some kind of central crossing point of a lot of different cultures and personalities. Certain characters and films are successful all over the world. And also, these places, these corporations are dealing with an audience that is so vast. It's not, you can't compare it to a village where everyone knows everyone else, and their religious and mythological ideology is all related to each other in a small, contained environment. That means all their art and their dancing and their music and their rituals are all relating directly to the way they live their life every day. But someone like Disney is selling stuff all over the globe in every language. So they're not really paying much attention to individual cultural differences. They're trying to hit that nerve in the middle that everybody can react to. They each have positive and negative aspects to them. But for me as a contributor, as a creative artist involved in that system, it's almost as if you are constantly being called upon to perform a dance that's not natural to you. A few steps and it feel good. Everything else is a strain every time. Sometimes it's the deadline requirement where you have to get up in the morning and somehow generate 20 hours of work in 8, that kind of thing, where you just have to so ratchet up your output that you just strip mine your energy and your enthusiasm. People can recognize when something's true, even if it's ugly or disturbed or horrible. If it's really and sincerely done, they react to it. So you almost never get that kind of intensity in a commercial product because they're looking to sell as much as possible. But the point I'm at, that was fun to go out and work in that field where there was all this history and all this support system. I mean, if you work on a film for Disney, there's hundreds of people working on this movie. So there's all this talent pouring into it. And often the guiding corporate structure to them it's a commodity. So they're trying to make the most money for the least expenditure. So they're constantly trying to undercut the talent, contributing to it. But now that I'm doing a lot of my own work, I'm writing and painting, you get like I said before, it's a much quieter, but much more specific kind of personal experience that's transcribed. So your audience is more limited, but it tends to be a richer connection, I think. So there's such a hunger for something that is more real, connected to more reality, that doing these kinds of projects like we're doing, the Giggle Bubble, is coming from other sources, smaller publishers or on the web, and individuals are seeking it out because it has much more truth in it. But a corporation would really have to have a mission of making that part of their image to be serving a better, higher purpose. But they're all beholden to stockholders, and the stockholders just care about profit. So violence and sexual enticement and titillation are always going to attract a big audience. It's just a natural reflex, I guess. But parents are seeking out better things for their kids in other avenues. What you have, essentially, is a proliferation of choice beyond anything that there's ever been. And even, when I was a kid in the 60s, I mean, people who were 30 and over didn't get what was going on in the music then with the Beatles and Bob Dylan. It was just junk to them, and it stayed that way for a long time. Like if you look at the corporate advertising, they just didn't know what was going on. Nowadays, if something pops up in the culture, Pepsi and Levi's are using it to make commercials in a few months, just like that. So it's almost as if they're tuned into finding it. And of course, as soon as that happens, it does disperse it across a wider range of awareness. But it obviously deletes its intensity because now it's being used to hawk a product as opposed to express some kind of genuine angst or joy or genuine human experience being translated into art and going out. It's grafted onto this economic engine very quickly. Well, I think now the untamed art tends to jump right past people's expectations and often their comfort level. Being at a concert or a live performance can never be matched when it's filmed and recorded and canned. There's a lot of layers of interference between you and the direct experience of it. So that kind of artwork is always small and personal to the people receiving it, I think. But then it can actually spawn an appetite to go out and have that experience again in other ways, or make it themselves. So, and everybody has a different kind of wavelength that they respond to with that. Because I know a lot of young people, when I was teaching and just going to these conventions that I do sometimes, because they have been almost since birth, their experience of art has been almost entirely through the channels of these corporate control things like television shows and cartoons, even PBS shows. That something raw like that, where there's no clear script and no clear beginning, middle, and end, it makes them uncomfortable. That's something they have to grow around or grow into. But then when it grabs them, it changes the way they perceive everything else. So the web can broadcast this kind of thing, and you can communicate some of the energy, but what you want to happen is for those people to go out and create that kind of energy in their own community. Another thing in commercial art is the result is everything. Everything's tailored toward the result. Whereas in this new kind of way of making art, it's really more about the experience of going through it. What fascinates me most is finding some way to portray living human consciousness in any kind of image. Whether it's a narrative where you're seeing a character go through lots of different actions, speaking dialogue, that gives you a space across time to find a lot of revealing gestures and language and acting. But in a still image, such as a portrait, you've only got the one image to encompass as much humanity and history and even the future in this image. Get that sense of a consciousness in there. And it can be the slightest thing sometimes in a still image. If you have something that looks like a wanted poster, you've got a limited range of expression, but sometimes just the way someone will hold their shoulder and their neck will convey so much about their personality. Like an uptight, kind of violent person would usually hold themselves in. They're always kind of control this outburst of energy. Someone who's very free and relaxed, like a young, happy kid, will have all kinds of crazy looseness in their body language. So that and that very mysterious reflections in the eyes that vary from person to person. Trying to get all that in whatever medium it is, if it's just a drawing, painting, long narrative, that capturing a consciousness and conveying it irrevocably to the viewer is the thing that interests me.